The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. On this first day of March, it's a Saturday. I hope everybody is having a good weekend. I hope you continue to have a good weekend. And Yaron Brook Show is back with more coverage. So I got an email, I think this morning, from Alex Epstein, and he asked me to comment on Richard Hanania's post on yesterday's fiasco with Trump, Zelensky, and Vance. Richard had a different interpretation of what happened than I did. And in spite of the fact that Richard generally is pretty good on the Ukraine issue, on the Russia issue, and is quite good on many issues regarding to Trump. So I thought I would take this on. I was going to do a show anyway about Ukraine, maybe something like why I support Ukraine, why I think foreign aid to Ukraine is a good investment, maybe something like that. So we can get into that as well today. But I want to address what happened yesterday in the White House. I know I talked about this yesterday, so why am I repeating it? Well, partially because 24 hours have passed, or a little less than that, but so that gives us a little bit of reflection, a little bit of time to consider what happened there, a little bit of time to actually review all the videos. If you remember yesterday, I was literally commenting almost in real time. I mean, as this was progressing. I don't think, I'm pretty sure I didn't say anything yesterday I disagree with, so nothing has really changed, but it is good to step back and take another look and examine this. I also have the text of the actual text of the kind of final exchange between the two. I've also read a number of different commentaries on what people out there are thinking about what happened in the Oval Office, and basically everybody falls into two camps: the crazy MAGA camp, which thinks that Trump could do no wrong, and therefore this is all Zelensky's fault, and a kind of a never Trump camp, which blames Trump and Vance for this. I fall. I'm obviously much closer to the second camp, and I'll also read to you from what I thought was the best analysis of this, and that is Jonah Goldberg's analysis of what happens. I thought he was best in terms of reflecting what actually happened. But we're gonna take on what Richard said. Richard is in the camp. In the MAGA camp, although he finds himself, I actually saw a tweet where he said, I'm agreeing with all these MAGA people. Well, wait a minute, what's going on, right? So he's not comfortable being in the MAGA camp. He certainly doesn't want to be in the MAGA camp, but he claims, this is how I read it, this is how I saw it. So we will take this up, and we will try to analyze what actually happened, and kind of from the perspective of a day later, and try to analyze this. I will also try to cover this topic of, why should anybody care, right? Why should Americans care? This is a conflict far away. What's it got to do with us? Why should we support Ukraine? It's a lot of money. Yaron, why don't you go and fight for Ukraine? Put your body where your mouth is. I'll address that. It's, by the way, the dumbest argument anybody can make. And as I said yesterday, it's very, very indicative where everybody on that side makes the same argument over and over again, just suggests that they don't even know what they're saying. They're just mouthing what they've been taught is an appropriate response to anybody who is pro-Ukraine or pro-Israel. I've heard that about Israel. Why don't you go fight on the battle lines in Israel? As I said in the past, the difference between me and them is I've done that. I've been there. I did that. my time's over. My role now is a speaking role, not a fighting role. I try to be as consistent as possible right now. Yeah. So let's jump in. So I think everybody knows what happened. I think you all saw the video, or you saw bits of the video. I don't know if you saw the whole 40 minutes or 49 minutes, I think, almost 50 minutes of the video. The whole thing. I had to watch it in little segments. I really can't watch these people on television. On video, I get really antsy and angry and upset. This is why I much prefer reading about it afterward, reading the transcript, because I can be more objective about it. I can be more detached. But I just generally, I find everybody who's on television talking about this stuff, and the politicians, all the politicians, the leaders, Trump, Vance, all these guys, they're just such idiots. I mean, they're not very smart. They don't really know what they're doing, and this is the key about what happened yesterday, is they don't know what they're doing. I don't think this was an ambush, with one exception. I think Vance did this on purpose, but I don't think this was an ambush. I certainly don't think Trump ambushed Zelensky. I think Trump wanted to sign this deal, and I don't think Zelensky wanted a cause a thing here. We'll get into this. I think everybody mishandled this. But the fault is with the host, and the fault has to be with Trump as the host of this event. In addition, I'll add that the whole setup here is very weird. So this was supposed to be a photo op. They're sitting down for a photo op. They usually sit down, chat a little bit. Trump makes a statement, Zelensky makes a statement, and then take maybe 2-3 questions from the journalist, and then they leave. The press conference is supposed to be after they sign the agreement. So they leave this, they go to lunch, then they go sign the agreement, they have discussions, and then they sign the agreement, and then they have a joint press conference, and this is where they take questions from the journalists. So this was like, this was supposed to be at most 10 minutes. Typically, this is 10 minutes, not 50, right? Not 50. So that's the first thing to know. Trump could have ended this any point before the 40-minute mark. Should have, particularly when he saw that there was disagreement between himself and Zelensky. The fact that he continued it just shows just inexperience. It shows lack of thought, lack of thought about where this was going and what would happen. It was really, really bad of him and Vance and Marco Rubio and the rest of the foreign policy team to allow this to get to the point that it did. It's their job to control situations like this, and it's their job to have made this shorter and to get it on with and to go do what Trump, I think, really wanted to do, which is get this deal signed. Didn't happen. All right, so let's read Richard. Richard said, I watched the entire press conference with Zelensky. There was 40 minutes of discussion up to the argument. Most people saw at most the last 10 minutes. The whole video gives the proper context. I agree, it's worth watching the whole thing. Well, it's not worth watching the whole thing. If you want to comment on it, you should watch the whole thing. Most of you don't need to watch the whole thing. It's painful to watch. When I first watched the argument without the proper context, I thought it was possible that Trump and Vance ambushed Zelensky, or were even trying to humiliate him. That's not what happened. You had 40 minutes of calm conversation. Vance made a point that didn't attack Zelensky and wasn't even addressed to him. And Zelensky clearly started the argument. Now, I don't agree with that at all. Vance didn't have to make this point. This is a point. At this point, Trump had just made a comment. I'll read you the comments. And then Trump says, next question. And Vance chimes in to talk about, to say the next point. And the issue of contention here is Putin, are negotiations with Putin going to be fruitful? Is Putin a guy to negotiate with? And Trump goes, and I'll read this quickly, Well, if I didn't align myself with, somebody asked him about, do you align yourself with one of the sides? And Trump says, well, I didn't align myself with both of them. You'd never have a deal if I didn't align myself. You want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal? That doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America, and for the good of the world, I'm aligned with the world, and I want to get this over with. You see the hatred Zelensky got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got a tremendous hatred, and I understand that. But I can tell you the other side is not exactly in love with him either. So it's not a question of alignment. I have to align with the world. I'm aligned with the world. I want to get the thing set. I'm aligned with Europe. I want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to be tough. I could be tougher than any human being has ever been. I'd be so tough that you're never going to get a deal that way. So that's the way it goes. So Trump is making moral equivalence. He's the negotiator. He can't take a side. Both sides hate each other. Both sides hate each other equally, and he's not going to say one side is more valid than other. Complete, utter, 100% moral equivalency. It's infuriating. And of course, it's true. If he wants to cut a deal where we carve up the baby, where we get 50-50 or whatever, then and Zelensky's sitting there, and look, he's fuming inside. He's fuming inside. His country has been invaded. He's been fighting a brutal war for 3 years. In his mind, I think in any reasonable person's mind, Putin is the villain. There is no moral equivalency. He's actually shown Trump photos at the beginning of the discussion of Ukrainian POWs. He's told the story of the 20,000 children that Putin has kidnapped. He's made the case that Putin is a monster, and this is a battle for self-defense that they're trying to fight. And then Trump keeps going back to moral equivalency. There's no difference between the two. And it's Zelensky, he just hates Putin. Well, of course he hates Putin. Who wouldn't hate Putin in that situation? I mean, I hate Putin, and I'm not in Zelensky's situation. Now, at this point, Zelensky is quiet. And Trump goes, last question. And then J.D. Vance jumps in and said, I want to say something. And this is where it goes off the tracks. Because Vance didn't need to say anything here. He didn't. Trump had already made the moral equivalency. He was wrapping things up. Everything was finishing up. Zelensky stayed quiet. It had been contentious up until now, but didn't get into any kind of, there were no emotions. It was kind of, Trump would say something and Zelensky would kind of contradict him, but not really, sticking to his talking points, security guarantees and stuff like that. And then Vance, out of nowhere, he didn't need to say anything. He comes in and he basically, he says the following. I will respond to this. So look, for 4 years, the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden, of thumping our chest and pretending that the president of the United States' words matters more than the president of the United States' action. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing. Now, this is wrong on so many different levels. So many different levels. Blaming Biden for this. Now, yeah, I get the argument that maybe if Biden had been stronger, tougher, if he had made a strong argument to Putin, maybe he could have prevented Putin from going to war. Who knows? But Joe Biden thumping his chest. And by the way, throughout this conversation between Trump and Zelensky, every opportunity Trump had, he would slam Biden. Every single opportunity. It was disgusting and ridiculous and stupid, and just shows kind of the low self-esteem Trump has. That he constantly has to bring up how bad his predecessor was, how awful his predecessor was, and by the way, how great he is. Constantly. It doesn't stop. And, so he's saying, what option do we have? Right? Vance is saying, what options do we have? We've gone Joe Biden's way with this thumping your chest with no action. The only path and what makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy? Really? Is that what made America good in World War II? Engaging in diplomacy? Is that what made America good in any war? And when in the history of the United States, I'm serious, when in the history of the United States has diplomacy actually led to a really positive outcome? Now, you might find one. I'm not saying there isn't. But where? The peace deal between South and North Vietnam. What peace deal? The peace deals between the many times, the United States forced Israel to negotiate with the Palestinians. When is diplomacy is what made the United States good? I'd say what makes America good is that we stand, good foreign policy-wise, is that we stand with justice. We stand with truth. We stand with the righteous against evil. We don't necessarily fight. We don't necessarily put our troops, our people at risk. But what makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. So, we've tried Biden's way, which is to be tough, although they keep calling him weak, but supposedly he was tough. Now let's try this. So now Zelensky's kind of, okay, both of them have said all this stuff about the need to negotiate with Putin. He's had enough of this. And yes, he could have stayed quiet here and let the whole thing wrapped up. That's true. But that's not Zelensky. Zelensky is going to stand up and defend himself and his country. He also has a constituency, if you will, his own people and the Europeans. And here he's being, told. Basically, what does diplomacy mean? Let's be clear about what diplomacy means. Diplomacy means Ukraine giving up a bunch of stuff after it was invaded. Diplomacy doesn't mean we'll figure out how to negotiate with Putin so he leaves your territory. And since Trump, throughout the conversation, every single time Zelensky or a commentator, one of the reporters asked about security guarantees, Trump says, no. Let's do a deal. We'll do a deal with Putin, then we'll see. Right? So Zelensky's like, what's this deal? We're going to give, half the territory. So he's in this clear weak position. He's just been told the path of diplomacy is the only path. So he says, can I ask you something? Okay, so he occupied big parts of Ukraine, parts of East and Crimea. So he occupied it in 2013, so during a lot of years. I'm not speaking about just Biden, but in those times, there was President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, and now President Trump. And God bless President Trump will stop him. But during 2013, nobody stopped him. Near 2014. He just occupied and took, and he killed people. And Trump says 2015, and Vance says 2014 to 2015. Trump says, I was not there. And Zelensky keeps on going. But during 2014 till 2022, the situation was the same. In other words, you were president during part of this. That people are dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversations, my bilateral conversations, and we signed with him. Me, like a new president in 2019, I signed with him. The deal, I signed with him. Macron and Macron, we signed ceasefire, all of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with the gas contract, but after that, he broke the ceasefire. He killed our people. He didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, are you talking about? What do you mean? So what basically he's saying here is, look, yeah, we've done diplomacy with Putin, and he breaks deals over and over and over again. Now, granted, he didn't need to say all this, but he's trying to say, come on, people, be real. Now, he could have said that behind closed doors, but again, he's been relatively okay until now. He's kept his mouth shut. And now Vance is coming after him. And then this is where it completely goes bonkers. And it completely goes bonkers because this is where Vance takes it to bonker territory. Here's what Vance says. I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country. Yeah, give it to Putin. The destruction ends. That's me, not Vance. Vance continues. Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office to try to litigate this in front of the American media. Isn't that what you just started? You told Zelensky he had to go in diplomacy, that was the only way. You're the one litigating it. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into conflict. And this is where, it goes off. Zelensky says you beat Ukraine. Zelensky says, I've watched and I've seen stories. So he's read about it on Twitter, and he goes on to say, if you even do you think it's respectful to come here and attack the administration? He hasn't attacked anybody. And Zelensky says, yeah, there are a lot of problems because but you have a big ocean between you. So you don't feel those problems. We feel it, believe me. He's being lectured to by Vance on what he should do with his country. And then Trump loses it. You can't tell us how to feel. What are you talking about? We're trying to solve a problem. You can't tell us how we feel. You're in no position to dictate that. You don't have any cards, and that's it. It's a disaster, a complete disaster from that point on. So I think Zelensky has tried for 40 minutes. He's trying to stay calm, but express the fact that there's still real issues on the table that have not been resolved. To go back to Richard Hanania, he says, you had 40 minutes of calm conversation. Vance made a point that didn't attack Zelensky. It poked him, and then it attacked him. You don't have men. You don't have men there. You don't have people to go to the front line. He's attacking him. He's attacking his ability to defend his own country. Sure, he's attacking him. And wasn't even addressed to him as Zelensky clearly started the argument. No, Vance started the argument. It was addressed to him, right? And then in the first 40 minutes, Richard Hanani writes, Zelensky kept trying to go beyond what was negotiated in the deal. Yes, because he's not happy with the deal, obviously. And he wants to make it clear. He still is waiting for the security guarantees. Look, this is a guy who has, on several occasions, Trump said, yeah, I'm talking to Putin. When did you last talk to Putin? 2 days ago, we had a conversation. And Zelensky's sitting there thinking, what are they talking about? How much of Ukraine has Trump already given to Putin? What is he negotiating? How can he negotiate peace for me? It's my country, not his. Again, Trump tomorrow can stop aid to Ukraine. That's something within, you could argue, okay. But this isn't stopping aid for Ukraine. This is creating moral equivalency. This is negotiating for Ukraine with Putin. Well, when Trump was asked a question, it was always, we'll see. Yeah, Trump would not commit to anything. Zelensky made blanket assertions that there would be no negotiating with Putin and Russia would pay for the war. Well, I mean, they were blanket assertions, but they weren't very forceful. They were done pretty mildly. And he didn't say there would be no negotiating. He wants security guarantees for those negotiations. He said there would be no ceasefire, not that there would be no negotiations. And that a peace would require security guarantees. When Trump said there was tragedy, that people on both sides were dying, Zelensky interjected that Russians were the invaders. Yes. And this is the point. Trump is constantly making moral equivalence. And Zelensky knows better. And he's living it. It's his people dying. It's his country that's being invaded. He knows there's a moral equivalency here. Should he let Trump get away with that? I don't think so. Does he not stand up for his own people? Does he not stand up for the righteousness of his cause? Trump doesn't have to say people on both sides are dying. Trump doesn't have to bring the moral equivalency over and over and over again into the discussion. But he does, constantly. And in that sense, egging and poking and antagonizing Zelensky. So the idea that this is somehow Zelensky's fault. For his part, Trump made clear that continued delivering military aid, that was much more ambiguous than what I think Hanania is presenting here. All Zelensky had to do was remain calm a few more minutes, and they would have signed a deal. Yes, but that's true of J.D. Vance even more so. J.D. Vance not answering that question, not giving Zelensky an opportunity to respond, and then not insulting the men in Ukraine, it would have been over. Hanani goes on, the argument started when Trump pointed out that it would be hard to make a deal if you talk about Putin the way Zelensky does. Yeah, but Zelensky talks about Putin for a very, very good reason that way. What other option is there? What, would talk nice about Hitler and you make a deal? Vance Dexter makes the reasonable point that Biden called Putin names and that didn't get us anyway. That is not reasonable because Biden didn't call Putin names. Biden was way too weak, certainly before the war started, and again provided weapons to Zelensky, provided weapons to Ukraine with conditions attached to them, which made it impossible for Ukraine actually to defend itself properly. So you can make half-baked, half-assed, half-true statements, which is what J.D. Vance is doing, but the only reason he interjects here, is to get a rise from Zelensky. You know, the Zelensky-Trump dynamic was calm and stable. I wouldn't say, calm and stable. I'd say, it was held in control. It was controlled because Zelensky, for the most part, held in tongue, given the amount of nonsense, moral equivalency, complete betrayal of goodness that Trump exhibited, and his just going off of these tangents about how awful Biden is, and a number of other tangents that had nothing to do with what was going on. And then, of course, they tried to insult Zelensky about what he was wearing, and there were a number of questions that kind of came from the kind of MAGA journalists. Trump, the moral courage you have to call Putin and talk about. I mean, if I was Zelensky, I would have walked out of the meeting. I just stood up and walked out. And I know it's suicide for Ukraine to do that, but the disrespect, talk about disrespect, for Trump to talk about moral courage, to call a monster, to call the guy who started the war in order to start negotiations behind Zelensky's back. You can't drop this context, Richard. And you know all this. You've written about all this. I mean, I think Richard Hanna is trying to find something to side on the Trump side because I don't know. I don't understand this. I really don't understand this. Yeah, it was when Vance spoke that Zelensky started to interrogate him. Interrogate him? It's complete nonsense. I mean, read the transcript. Or watch the video. There's no interrogation. He asked him a simple question. How can we trust Putin? And then Vance goes into basically insulting Ukraine. Throughout the press conference to that point, everyone was making their argument directly to the audience. Zelensky decided to challenge Vance and ask him hostile questions. He went back to his point that Putin never sticks to ceasefires, once again implying that negotiations are pointless. Yeah. Why on earth would you do this? Then came the fight we saw. Zelensky was minutes away from being home free. True. And so was Trump, because I think Trump wants this deal. And I don't think Trump sabotaged this. I think if anybody sabotaged this, and I think Trump wants this deal. I think Vance does not. Vance is a pro-Putin force in the White House. Trump likes Putin for pragmatic reasons. Trump likes Putin because Putin's a strong man, and he likes strong men. Trump likes deals, and so he's in it for the deal. Vance likes Putin for philosophical, ideological reasons. Putin is strong, a powerful defender of the West. He's anti-left. He's anti-woke. He's anti-gays. He's anti the things. He's anti-Europe. J.D. Vance hates Europe. Europe is the enemy. I mean, isn't it funny that he goes to Europe and lectures them about free speech, which they to some extent deserves, but never lectures Russia about free speech? There's a lot less free speech in Russia than there is in Europe. I mean, these people, Vance and MAGA intellectuals, they consider Europe more evil than Russia. And they consider Europe more evil than Russia because Europe is left, or they associate with left. They associate with left, DI, woke, all the evils of leftism, they associate with Europe. Russia is standing up against Europe. And by fighting in Ukraine, Russia is standing up for tradition, for Christian orthodoxy, for religion, for Europe to a large extent is evil because it is secular. That's part of what makes it left, is it's secular. And as much as I am critical of Europe, and I think what's happening in Europe is horrible on so many fronts, I'll take Europe a million times over. And so would any of you if it came to actually living there than Russia. So Zelensky was minutes away from being home free. So was Vance, so was Trump. And he would have had the deal and new commitments of the Trump administration. The deal was not a good deal, not for Zelensky. The point Vance made was directed against Biden and the media, taking them to task for speaking in moralistic terms. But isn't that the way you're supposed to speak? Is there something wrong with speaking in moralistic terms? Richard? You of all people? This offended Zelensky. Yes. And he responded, but he didn't respond in an offensive way. He responded that Putin is not to be trusted, which is true. I've been a fan of Zelensky up to this point, but this showed so much incompetence, if not emotional instability, that I don't see how he recovers from this. The relationship with the administration is broken. Ukraine should probably go with new leadership at this point. So I think this is very disappointing from Richard. I think the real emotional immaturity here was from Vance and Trump. Trump should have ended this meeting much earlier, so it never got to this point. Vance should have never interjected. He didn't have to, Zelensky was holding his tongue over the moral equivalency and over the trusting Putin thing, and Vance just egged him on. So to blame Zelensky is terrible here. Look, Zelensky came into this meeting. You can see from the moment he shook hands from Trump. Trump is just within a week has called him a dictator. Said that Ukraine started the war. Is calling Putin behind his back to negotiate about Ukrainian land. I mean, Zelensky's not happy with this. The deal is a stupid deal. It gives Ukraine literally nothing. All this talk about rare earth material, there's very little evidence from what I'm reading that there really is any rare earth material. I mean, Zelensky at some point focuses on what we really need is LNG terminals because we've got a lot of natural gas that we could export, and help Europe out with natural gas. He knows that this rare earth and all this stuff is just bogus. It's just the whole thing is staged for Trump to have a win because he's a deal maker, so he made a deal with Zelensky. And it's all BS. So Zelensky's coming into this meeting with a bad attitude, and he should have a bad attitude. He's coming in this meeting knowing that Trump has already stabbed him in the back, has already excluded NATO membership from any negotiation, refuses over and over and over again to provide any kind of security guarantees in terms of the deal that is going to be cut with Zelensky and then the deal that supposedly is going to be cut with Putin. I think he was angelic in terms of how he conducted himself relative to what was going on inside of him and what Trump actually deserves. Now, this is the problem. Like it or not, Trump was elected by the American people. Like it or not, and I don't, Trump is the president of the United States of America. He holds the fate of Ukraine and much of the world in his hands. This is why I was so against his election. Because this is not a man who should be in such a position. He's not worthy of it. He's not competent enough. He's not smart enough. And he does not have the moral character to be in such a position. And this is the position that he's in. He holds the fate of these countries. Zelensky came to grovel. And he's not a good groveler. That's the reality. He's not a good groveler. This is what Richard is complaining about. The realist school of foreign policy. Oh, you got, to be a good president, a good diplomat, good everything, you need to be a groveler, Zelensky. You need to develop groveling skills. And the reality is, and maybe you do need the groveling skills. The reality is that Ukraine is in deep doo-doo without America. Not so much without American weapons, not so much without American moral support, but without American intelligence. Ukraine is in deep trouble in coordination and intelligence, and it's something that it's going to be very difficult for the Europeans to step in and fill. They could in a year or two. They could probably provide weapons, but they can't provide the kind of security, intelligence primarily, that Ukraine needs. So Trump has him by the balls. That's the reality. Now, the other thing that Trump keeps doing, and he did this with Europeans, with Macron, and Macron corrected him. He did it again with Starmer, and he did it again with Zelensky, and Zelensky tried to correct him, but it didn't go well. He keeps mentioning how the United States has given $350 billion to Ukraine, which is just a number he made up, has no relation to reality. It's way less than half of that. But it doesn't matter. He just makes it up and he keeps repeating it. Again, he's just stabbing, and he keeps putting down the Europeans. They haven't given enough. They haven't matched us. And Zelensky said, no, they've done a lot. And if Zelensky really wanted to be aggressive, he says they've actually done more than America has. So it's so here's what Jonah Goldberg has to say. He's talking about this bait switching that Zelensky made an excellent point. He should have just shut up. He should have not spoken, given Trump. Okay, so here's what Jonah Goldberg says. He says, fair enough about the bait switch, about taking the bait that J.D. Vance threw him. But this is yet another situation where others are to blame for not fully adjusting to the fact that Trump is a thin-skinned, malicious toddler with poor impulse control. Now, I wish I could write like that. Now, if I could write like that, this is what made Jonah Goldberg such a successful writer and so popular. Others are to blame for not fully adjusting to the fact that Trump is a thin-skinned, malicious toddler with poor impulse control. Absolutely right. It's always someone else's fault for not enabling or humoring him sufficiently. You know who knows Trump is easily baited into childish outbursts? J.D. Vance. And either out of cynicism or petulant incompetence, he acted on that. So that's how I see the event in isolation. But since I'm not going to switch gears back, and then so he goes on. This disaster never should have been possible in the first place. Trump's position is that we should make a profit over Ukraine's misfortune. That's why he insists America should get money back plus. As in, we should get the $350 billion we gave Ukraine, a wildly inflated and inaccurate number Trump cannot be talked out of using, plus a little extra for our troubles. That's grotesque. And then he goes on. Trump has called Zelensky a dictator. But when asked if Putin was also a dictator, he refused to do so, saying, I don't use that language lightly. That's darkly funny, because Trump doesn't actually consider dictator to be an insult, or rather he only thinks it's a useful insult when it's not true, i.e. when he's talking about Zelensky. For strong men, respect is required. For friends and allies who share our values, contempt and bullying is the preferred course. So ingrained in this deformed moral calculus in Trump's thinking, he actually thinks Zelensky's animosity for Putin is unreasonable. Quote, you see the hatred he's got for Putin, and it's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate, he says during Friday's Oval Office exchange. When has Trump condemned Putin's hatred for Zelensky and the Ukrainian government? Putin calls them Nazis and drug addicts. And for the idea of Ukraine as a nation or nationality. Doesn't that make negotiations difficult too? If it does, Trump doesn't complain about it because Putin deserves respect, despite his crimes. Ukraine deserves contempt for not laying back and taking it. And Zelensky deserves contempt for not undermining his country for the sake of a real deal Trump can brag about. It's appalling. So I agree completely with Jonah Goldberg. This whole situation, you cannot take this meeting, this engagement, what was said here, out of the context of Trump's entire approach to the issue. You cannot take it out of the context of Trump's betrayal of an ally, stabbing in the back of the good in the face of its confrontation with evil. You cannot take this exchange out of the context of the reality, which one country invaded another, killed its people, took its land, continues to slaughter its people, bomb its cities, destroy its infrastructure. And the other is desperately trying to hold on, and it's sin. The reason ultimately was invaded. The sin of Ukraine is that it would not agree to become like Belarus. It did not agree to become just a satellite of Russia. It hearkened, it willed itself to be part of the West. It wanted to embrace the liberal, in the positive, classical liberal values of the West. It's got a far way to go. It's far from perfect. So is Europe, so is the United States. But that was its ambition. Its ambition was to be of the West. That's why Putin invaded. He couldn't tolerate Ukraine, a part of Russia, becoming westernized. I've been to Ukraine several times. I've been to Russia twice, St. Petersburg and Moscow. I've been in Ukraine, I've only been to Kiev. But I think it was 4 or 5 times I've been to Kiev. And the difference between the two places always struck me as stark, even way before any of this happened. Russia is a dark place. People are afraid to speak up. Putin has his boot on their throat. It is a place where oligarchs navigate politics. They could become poor tomorrow, or they could become dead tomorrow, and they know it. All depending on who's in control of what. I know one of the, if you will, American oligarchs in Russia. It was, Russia's a place that has no liberty, no freedom. Yes, you can talk about Ayn Rand, you can talk about libertarian ideas, but it's all mute if you offend, as I think I've told you. Somebody asked me in one of the Q&As in St. Petersburg a long time ago what I thought of Putin. I said, he's a thug, he's a mafioso. And people were horrified, not by the fact, they all know it's true, but by the fact that I would say it in St. Petersburg, and they told me never to say it again. They live in fear. Ukraine, on the other hand, my sense, vibrant, westernizing, eager to become part of the West, open to speech, to argument, to debate, to discussion. As I think I told you, Atlas Shrugged was best-selling book in 2015 and 2016 in Ukraine. Part 1 and Part 2 and 3. It came out in 3 parts. Were all bestsellers. Ukraine was, flawed, corrupt, bad, but among young people, a real eagerness for change. A real eagerness to achieve something and to achieve freedom. A real liberty and freedom movement. And not afraid. And all the theories, all the stories about, the Ukrainians were manipulated by the CIA in 2008 and 2014 and Maidan in the square. I spoke to the people who were there. These are people who are committed to their own liberty, committed to their own freedom. They went to Maidan and they embraced the Orange Revolution because they wanted Russia's influence gone. They didn't want to have anything to do with Russia. They went there because they wanted a fight. They wanted a future. They wanted the West. Just like, if you ask me, how do you know, if you don't know any of the history, you don't know anything, what's the difference between the Israelis and the Palestinians? I tell you, well, just look at their cultures. Look at the kind of culture the Palestinians created. Look at the kind of cultures the Israelis created. You can tell the difference. Now, and you can see Israel, the good guys, Palestinians are the bad guys, just by the culture they created for themselves. You can do the same thing with Russia and Ukraine. Not quite as stark, because Ukraine is still emerging from the shadow of the USSR and from the shadow of Russia's influence. But in terms of the direction it's heading, it's unequivocal. Ukraine was heading towards the good. Russia has been heading, since Putin took control, has been heading in the direction of bad, evil, destructive, authoritarian. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know the history. I mean, it's better if you know the history, but you don't need to know the history. Now, why should America care? Why should you care about any of this? And why should America support this financially? It's a lot of money. We're in deep doo-doo financially, and we are. And I would say, let me just address the money for a second. I would say, if I thought that the United States, this government, the Trump administration, Biden administration, any administration, actually took government spending, insanity seriously, then I would say, yeah, I mean, the aid to Ukraine is on the table. But they don't take it seriously. Of all the things government spends money on, aid to Ukraine is one of the better things. If nothing really is on the table in terms of cutting edge spending, just the shotgun random approach of firing people left and right, but not actually cutting programs, not actually cutting government expenditures, not actually shrinking government, just look at the budget coming out of the House of Representatives, then you can't take seriously the idea that anybody in government cares one iota about government spending. I don't believe any of them do. Everything, all the stuff they're talking about government spending is all about power. It's all about exerting power. It's not about, government shouldn't be doing these things. Now, so of all the trillions of dollars the United States government spends. So why is 60 billion, 100 billion to Ukraine so bad? And what are the interests? What's the positive? Well, why should we care? Well, certainly morally we should care because Putin is evil and Ukraine is basically good. All these stories about the evil of Zelensky are BS created by MAGA, made up BS. Ukrainians being Nazis and so on. Are they Nazis in Ukraine? Sure. They're Nazis in America. Are they Nazis in Russia? Yeah, even more than in Ukraine. You could argue that Putin is closer to Nazism than anybody in Ukraine in terms of his fascism and in terms of his authoritarianism. So it's just not, the criticism of Zelensky is just not serious. It doesn't stand up to any factual examination. I mean, remember, Zelensky pissed off Trump in his first term because Zelensky wouldn't dig up dirt for Trump on Biden, on Hunter Biden. That's where the animosity started. Wouldn't dig up dirt. So why should you care? Because there's good and evil here. It's the same reason you should care about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What else? Well, what else is that Russia has nukes. And Russia has territorial ambitions. And whether we like it or not, we are part of NATO. And we are signed on to Article 5. Now, Trump could take us out of NATO. Fine. That could be discussed. I mean, World War III is a BS excuse for weakness, for compromise, for selling out, and for stabbing our allies in the back. That's what World War III is. Every time you want to make them all go, oh, World War III, yeah, we need to sell ourselves. We need to go lick the boots of a dictator because, oh, World War III. It's such a fear-based, emotion-based, counterfact nonsense. As if Putin would risk World War III. As if he doesn't care about life or death. As if Russian generals don't care about life or death. World War III, World War III. Nice thing about World War III is it wouldn't last very long. Pretty quick. So you've got a country with nukes run by a dictator. It's clearly evil, clearly a bad guy, with express territorial ambitions. Somebody who wants to control Europe, he'd like to take back Eastern Europe to put them under his umbrella, under his control. He's talked about the Baltics as if they're part of Russia. He's talked about Ukraine as if it's part of Russia. And he clearly has territorial disputes with Poland. He made that clear in his interview with Tucker. Now, the United States has signed Article 5. Article 5 was not triggered when Putin invaded Ukraine, but it would be triggered if he invaded Estonia or Lithuania or Latvia or Poland. The United States has strong incentive not to see its kids die on battlefields in Europe again. You want to prevent that? You stop Putin now. Because once he invades Estonia, you're kind of committed. And then American troops will die. And then World War III is a possibility. The only way to stop World War III, the only way to prevent the United States from having to commit troops to Europe, to fighting a war against Russia, is to stop him in Ukraine, to defeat him in Ukraine. I mean, imagine a president who came in and said, we are going to provide Ukraine with whatever weapons it needs in order to defeat the Russians. It can use those weapons in whatever way it deems. We will be shipping those weapons immediately. No money. We'll just send weapons. That costs money, but we'll just send weapons, particularly weapons that, out of date. And for us, we'll replenish them with new, better weapons. We would have had to do that anyway. But we'll send you all the weapons you need. You bomb the hell out of the Russians, because Russian Putin, he's a bad guy. Not just the Biden kind of wishy-washy chest thumping, real chest thumping. and real support. And go for it. We don't want to send troops, but we'll send you weapons. And you do it as necessary to crush this guy so he never, ever, ever poses a threat to the rest of Europe. Not him, not his successors, not the rest of the imperialistic, nationalistic Russian movement, which dominates politics in that country. Who the hell cares about diplomacy? Why would you engage in diplomacy with a thug? Why would you engage in diplomacy with Hamas? You shouldn't. Should you engage in diplomacy with Putin? No. Should you engage with diplomacy with evil? No, never, ever. Ayn Rand talks about this, and she's absolutely right. Compromise with evil only strengthens evil, never makes you better off. The only party to benefit from a compromise with evil is evil. You lose. There's nothing to gain from negotiating with Russia. Nothing. Diplomacy with Russia? You got to be kidding. Don't have diplomacy with Hitler. Don't have diplomacy with a monster like Putin. You don't have to go to war with him. You don't have to do diplomacy. And you don't have to force somebody who's basically your ally. So I'll make one last point. And I know, and for a while we won't talk about Ukraine because I'm said most of what I have to say about Ukraine. The battle you're doing this to prevent having the need to put American troops on the ground. But more than that, the battle in Ukraine is about Western civilization. I agree with MAG on this. It's about what Western civilization looks like in the future. Does Western civilization look like Russia? Is that the future of the West? And if Russia wins, there's a good chance it is. They win an election in Germany, they win an election in France, they win an election in Romania, they win elections, other countries they just take over, and the West descends into fascist authoritarianism. Or is the future of the West kind of the weak, but still better, kind of liberal democracies, as they call themselves, of Western Europe? I'll take that over the authoritarianism of Putin any day. It's not good enough. And what we're fighting for is a Europe, a world of real freedom and real liberty. But Trump and Putin are not taking us closer to that. One iota. They're moving us away from that. If you want to move towards greater liberty and freedom, you better fight the enemies of liberty and freedom, the current obvious physical enemies of that. And Russia is such an enemy. I mean, after Zelensky beats the Russians and pulls them back, then we can lecture Europe about you're not living up to the ideals of Western civilization. You should be better. We in America should be better too. But to side with a party that wants to extinguish Western civilization, that wants to kill it, destroy it, subvert it, and for some people to even associate that side with the West is so shockingly bad, so shockingly evil. It's just, it's horrific. And look, here's what this is about, but here's what the bigger intellectual agenda is about. And this is something that I'm going to be giving a bunch of talks on soon. The real question that we face today, and I'm not going to answer this question. I mean, you all know my answer, but I'm not going to answer it today. We'll answer it over the rest few years. The real question is, what is Western civilization? Is Western civilization basically the Enlightenment? Is the Enlightenment what makes the West special, unique, and civilized? Or is it Middle Ages Christianity? Is the West fundamentally Christian? Or is the West fundamentally the Enlightenment? If the West is fundamentally Christian, Putin's a good guy. And so is Trump. If the West is fundamentally the Enlightenment, Putin and Trump are both bad guys. And they need to be stopped. And they need to be fought. They need to be replaced. And we need a real vision for Western civilization. We need a real vision for what the West is, was, and most importantly, really, should be. And to a large extent, I'm going to dedicate a lot of my work to exactly that. What is, was, and what should be Western civilization? Where does it come from? What is the good in it? And who are its enemies? And I'm going to say, and I've said this many times, Christianity, certainly in its Middle Ages pre-Enlightenment form, is the enemy. As is communism, fascism, socialism, statism of all forms. All right. Let's stop there. I will say that this is just part of the breaking, just in the news, hit a few minutes ago. Former president of Ukraine and one of the country's main opposition leaders, Petro Poroshenko, who, is not a fan of Zelensky's, asked whether he will criticize Zelensky for what happened with Trump, said, I won't criticize Zelensky. That's not what Ukraine needs now. What we need is unity. They're in a war. They're in life or death. And it's amazing how the opposition in Ukraine is united with one goal. And that is to defeat Russia, to get its land back, to bring peace to its people. Peace through strength, I thought, was always the argument. Ukraine needs that strength in order to establish peace. By the way, Richard Hanani has a really good essay on Putin and why MAGA loves him. And I don't think I don't agree with everything he writes there, but it's good. And he's right. So it's disappointing that he can abstract away from stuff like that, abstract away from the whole context of the whole relationship, and come down on Zelensky so hard in his post. It's sad. All right, let's jump into the here to the super chat. I'll remind you that Alex Epstein is a sponsor of this show. You should go to alexepstein.substack.com. Best commentator out there, best talking points you'll get anywhere on fossil fuels, energy, what the Trump administration, one of the better things the Trump administration is doing on energy, what they're doing, why they're doing it. You can get that from Alex. And of course, on environmentalism and climate change. So, subscribe. There's also an Alex AI, which should be interesting and entertaining. Ask Alex AI questions you would ask Alex and it was trained on that. Yep. All right. I mean, the stuff that's going on is just mind-boggling to me, right? Elon Musk is on an Ayn Rand thing lately, which, hard to tell. I mean, Elon's just such a confused character. He's just so confused. All right, Troy, thank you. 500 Australian dollars. Really, really appreciate it. Troy says, I don't see how a reasonable person could read that blow-up as Zelensky's fault. I thought Richard Hanania and Konstantin Kisin both had really bad takes on this argument. Oh, I didn't even see Kissin's argument. I should probably look at it. But yes, unfortunately, what they focus on is on Zelensky trying And remember, English is not even his first language, trying to stand up for himself a little bit, trying to present, reject the moral equivalency being made. And I think he does, he's pretty calm relative to, given everything that's happened, relative to how he should be. But anyway, it's hard to keep that broad context always. Eric, does JD hate Europe and love Russia because JD rejects the Enlightenment? Does he see European craziness as the logical result of Enlightenment philosophy? Yes. But remember that America is the Enlightenment. But of course, JD and his Catholic integralists believe that America is primarily Christian. He's a Christian nationalist. He thinks America is a Christian nation, and that it's, the Enlightenment undermined. They draw a direct line between Enlightenment and the left, Enlightenment and woke, Enlightenment and DEI. That's their intellectual failure to see that indeed, if you're going to draw a line, woke and DEI and communism and the left and socialism are much closer to Christianity in terms of their affiliation, in terms of the actual stance that they take, than the Enlightenment. So JD actually does reject Europe. He sees it as the enemy, and he does view Putin as part of the solution. Primarily for Putin's rejection of, he might not like Putin's style, he might not like Putin's maybe too much of an authoritarian for his taste, but he likes the fact that Putin rejects Europe, rejects the left, rejects the LGBTQ plus, which is just code for the left. And but that's the right. That's the right today. You look at MAGA. If you look at them online, they despise Europe, and they really do despise. Really do despise the Enlightenment. Yeah, I mean, Victor Davis Hansen has a similar kind of read. His view is, Zelensky has to realize he's completely dependent on America. He should grovel. He should grovel. That's the solution. Instead of criticizing Trump for putting Zelensky in this kind of situation, Zelensky just needs to suck it up. Manas, any words on Spassky's death? Thanks for everything. No, I didn't realize he died. Let me maybe comment on that on Monday after I've had a little time to think about that and to maybe bring back Ayn Rand's essay. But I didn't realize Spassky had died. Ice Pick, Israel is lobbying the U.S. to let Russia keep its Syrian base as a bulwark against Turkey. The West is handicapping itself. I feel so deflated. Thanks for staying strong, Yaron, the only voice of reason. Yeah, I mean, Israel is very, very, very worried about its northern flank. It's worried about, yes, maybe it is, in a sense, significantly reduced the Iranian threat, at least until Iran gets a nuke. But it now has to worry about Erdogan and his influence in Turkey. And they think that by appeasing the Russians, this is why they probably vote for Russia and against Ukraine every time in the UN. It's just, again, stupid politics. You're not going to play Russia off of Turkey and actually come out better for it. It's just not going to happen. So Israel needs to figure out how to defend itself. I did read a story that Israel has now said that it will defend the Druze in southern Syria from the Islamists. So Israel is creating a buffer zone in that sense. But, yeah, no principles. No principles. Realpolitik, that is the game today. Just cut deals. Everybody is Trump. Andrew, if Zelensky had been quiet in response to the moral equivalency, it would have been immoral. The fact that it was in public makes this opposition more heroic. Rand's premise of pronouncing evil for instances like this. Yes, the problem is, And in that sense, Victor Davis Hanson is right. The problem is that by doing so, he's antagonizing Trump. And by antagonizing Trump, he might be signing the death warrant of Ukraine. That is, he might be making this a lot worse. Now, Zelensky right now is in London, where there's a big European summit on Ukraine. Interesting enough, the Baltic states were not invited. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia were not invited, and they're not happy about that. So I'm still hopeful. I mean, I realistically, not very, but somewhat hopeful that Europe can get its act together and actually do something substantively to combat, to help Zelensky, help Ukraine combat Russia. It is, another breaking story is that a Norwegian fuel company supposedly has stopped providing fuel to the U.S. Navy out of fury. This is a private company. Out of fury over what happened in the White House, the U.S. submarine had to backtrack and go somewhere else to get its fuel because they refused to fuel it. So, you know, the conflict with Europe is definitely escalating. There's no question. Paul, Dan Henniger from Wall Street Journal stated that Trump wants a pre-1930s world where strongmen carve up certain parts of the world, essentially agreeing with Jonah Goldberg. And I think that's true. I've talked about this. I think that the bottom line is what Trump wants is he wants Russia to, he doesn't care about Europe. He wants Russia and Europe to basically figure out who has influence over what. But basically Europe is Russia's domain. You know, I think he wants Latin America and he wants the Western Hemisphere to be America's domain. This is his whole thing about Panama. He wants China out of here. He wants Russia out of here. He wants Latin America to be America's. And I think the deal with China is going to be Asia's yours. If I was South Korea, this is another reason why Americans should care. If I was South Korea and if I were Japan, I would be terrified right now because, and certainly if I were Taiwan, I'd be terrified now because it's quite obvious that Trump will ultimately angle for a deal with Xi that I think gives China a lot of influence over Asia, as long as Xi, in a sense, leaves the Americas, and does not do certain things that offend Trump. I think Trump wants to carve up the world between Putin himself and Xi. Basically America is going to cede, I think, control over most of Africa to the Chinese and the Russians, so let them fight over it. I think Europe will be between the Europeans and the Russians. And Asia, they will leave to Xi, leave to China. And if I were Japan and South Korea, I'd be arming myself up to the teeth right now, including nuclear weapons. Because forget about trusting America. Forget about trusting America. And the Europeans should be doing the same thing because Europe could be a counterbalancing force in Europe. Europe could be the dominant force. Europe is much richer, much stronger than Russia is. It just needs to have some coordination. Yeah, India should be worried. India has disputes with China. There's no reason to believe that America is going to be involved there, that it wants to be involved. I think as Chinese influence grows in Asia, India has to be worried. Exactly how that plays out, I don't know. Hard to tell. I don't know the region well enough. Maybe in the end, India and China carve up Asia between the two of them. But India has to worry. It's got territorial disputes with China, and China could get quite aggressive with it. Gary, do you think this open display of being pro-evil more nakedly than before by Trump can wake up a significant number of Trump zombies? No. I see no evidence of that. The doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down, I see absolutely no evidence. I think there's certain people who voted for Trump. I think there's certain people who voted for Trump who will wake up from this. But I would never categorize them as zombies. There's some people who voted for Trump and always knew that one of his weaknesses was foreign policy, that resented the way he behaved towards North Korea. Anybody who celebrated Trump's behavior towards the dictator of North Korea last time is a zombie and is hopeless. But there were people who voted for Trump but resented that and were fearful about his foreign policy. like Mark Levin, they might wake up a little bit. But whether they will be willing to extrapolate from this a more general principle, I am skeptical. He's better than Biden. Trump's emotionalism trumps his ego. Vance is a sophist who is good at rhetoric. Both are good at overloading the mind of their opponent because their position is not rational. In that sense, they won the argument. Yeah, they're emotionalists. They're both fundamentally emotionalists because they're not tied to reality. They're not tied to any kind of reason-based morality or reason-based arguments. And in that sense, yeah, emotion looks like it wins, right? James, well, and they're stronger, right? They have all the cards. As Trump kept saying, you have no cards. It's true. They're stronger. They have the mightiest military force in all of human history behind them. How they got into a position where they're in charge of all that, that is a question to you guys who voted for him, for them. But yeah, that is the reality. The reality is now we have a couple of, irrational emotionalists at the helm of the mightiest military force in human history, with everything that implies. James, Trump strong arms Israel into accepting a ceasefire. He attempts to do it again with a Jewish head of state and calls him a dictator. Jewish head of state is Zelensky. The right's infatuation with Judaism is thin and weak. I don't know. I don't know that I see this as an issue of Judaism. I don't think this is an issue of him going after Zelensky because he's Jewish. I think he'd go after any leader of Ukraine. I think he doesn't like Zelensky for lots of reasons. I told you he didn't cooperate with him going after Hunter. But he also doesn't like him because Zelensky's considered a hero and got a lot of attention that Trump would love to get. Zelensky is actually heroic. Trump is not, and he knows it. Deep down, he knows it. And he's got a real inferiority complex next to Zelensky. That's a reality. He's stronger in a sense that he's got a bigger military, but in terms of his own personal moral worth, Zelensky is 100 times the man he is. 100 times the man he is. Andrew, your comments on this situation are excellent. Is there a connection between altruism and the right's antagonism towards the left and admiration for the strong man of the world? I sense it, but can't put my finger to it. I mean, they are narcissists. And they basically take advantage of the fact that we live in an altruistic world, in a world in which nobody will stand up to them because nobody will be self-interested enough. Nobody would have the self-esteem to stand up to them. They are the consequence of altruism because they have no self-esteem. They have no ground to stand on. That is the sense. That is the sense that altruism plays into it. Altruism creates a Donald Trump. He creates that kind of low self-esteem narcissism because, they clearly don't want to be altruistic. That doesn't fit. And there is no alternative. There is no rational self-interest. There's no such thing. So they reject reality and they focus in on, power and what they think is for them. MAGA generally is pro-sacrifice, and it's just the sacrifice of good for the sake of the strongman. Look, altruism is behind it all because why are people willing to be sacrificed? Because they're willing to be sacrificed for a greater cause. Why are they willing to accept the dictator? Because the dictator represents the entity that is going to tell them what to sacrifice for, who to sacrifice to. So altruism is all over this. Now, we could spend, we don't have the time today to go through all the details of this, but it's a good question. Maybe I'll do a whole show just on that because it deserves a show to trace back all the ways in which altruism affects us. Ayn Rand was brilliant at doing that. Clay, awesome show. If you're interested, I recommend checking out SCM Payne's video. She's a professor at the Naval War College and has discussed the Russian invasion of Ukraine and how China may leverage a materially weakened Russia. Yeah. I think China's just waiting because the weaker Russia gets and the weaker America presents itself, the stronger China is, and the stronger China will be willing to assert itself in the world. Nature Observer. For an hour yesterday, a real president graced the halls of the White House. He stood up for facts and moral purpose. I'm sure you know who I mean. Yeah, you mean Zelensky. Yes. Zelensky is a hero. He is 100 times the man Trump is. He's 100 times the president Trump is. Cook was real embarrassed watching the White House meeting. Yep. I mean, every time I hear Trump speaking for any kind of length of time, I'm embarrassed. I mean the rambling and the quality of his and the again the constant trying to protect himself, defend himself, justify himself, and put down everybody around him. It's just pathetic. Batil something, I can't pronounce it. Hananiah's post was weak and disappointing, like the Crenshaw loser as well. Keep telling the truth and defend them all side you're on. These people make me sick, pure evil. I agree. James, have you been to South Africa? Did you enjoy Cape Town or Johannesburg? Do you think us giving them less aid will impact our long-term relationship? Yes, I've been to South Africa. I've been to South Africa several times, although all of them from before apartheid went away. So I was there as a little child, as 1 or 2 years old. I was there as a 8, 9-year-old. I was there as a 21-year-old, just out of the Israeli army, and then I was there with my wife and my oldest son when he was a baby, right in, I think, 1990 maybe, so just before apartheid fell. And apartheid always disgusted me. It was horrible. It was despicable, particularly when I was an adult. I mean, when I was a little kid, I didn't think I noticed, but afterwards, it was just horrible. Lots of things to hate about South Africa in those days. I love Cape Town. Cape Town's a beautiful, beautiful city. Today, it's one of the most violent cities in the world. But it's truly a beautiful city, and Johannesburg, Johannesburg's where my father grew up. I have quite a bit of family in Johannesburg. It's a nice city. I didn't really enjoy Johannesburg very much, but Cape Town, you can see why Cape Town stands out. I've driven from Durban to Cape Town, along the coast, which is a beautiful, beautiful drive. If you're in South Africa, it's worth doing. Will us giving them less aid impact our long-term relationship? Maybe, but we shouldn't have a very positive relationship with South Africa. It's not a good. It's a very socialist and borderline racist now on the side of the blacks discriminating against whites regime. So we should be a lot tougher with them, and. I don't think we should be giving anybody aid except for when there's a clear, unequivocal American interest. I think there is one in Ukraine. I think there is one in Israel. I don't think there's one in very many other places in the world where we need to put American dollars to work. So I'm all for closing down USAID. Absolutely. I just don't think it's the be-all, the end-all of cutting government spending. But yeah, if you can close it down, shut it down, get rid of it completely, have the United States do no welfare, no charity abroad, that's great. I mean, I just hope they then turn to charity at home and start cutting the welfare state. Michael, we've had nutty presidents before. We will survive Trump. The economy will keep innovating, and objectivism will only grow more rapidly in time. Let's hope Michael is right. Certainly hope so. Drusky, Cambridge, Ma has legalized 6-story multifamily housing. Cambridge, Massachusetts, not Ma. Cambridge, Massachusetts legalized 6-story multifamily housing throughout the entire city. They also eliminated setbacks, units per area, restrictions, and minimum parking requirements. Yes, I mean, the Yes in My Backyard movement is actually having some success in what you'd call kind of leftist areas of the country. So yes, this is really good news, and it's good to see it in Cambridge, Massachusetts, one of the more leftist places in the country. And hopefully this is something that will expand, because it's the only way to really significantly, fundamentally lower the cost of housing. And that we will all benefit from. So things are happening in America that are positive. The Yes in My Backyard movement, which is spearheaded by left of center and right of center intellectuals, is, I think, winning on the ground and will have a profound impact, a profound positive impact. Not your average algorithm. How would reverse aging work? How would human beings function? And how would laws need to change if human beings could never die of disease or old age? Well, I mean, nobody said they could never die. I think that is mythology, but it would be good if they didn't die of old age and didn't die of diseases of old age. And they could, but they could still die. You could still put a bullet in their head, or there could be diseases that we still didn't have cures for, and we would die. I don't know how things would have to change. I don't see why they would change that much. I mean, I'm for getting rid of Social Security anyway, but if you stay young for hundreds of years, you can work for hundreds of years. There's no reason to redistribute wealth. There probably certain issues around property rights, certain issues about copyrights and patents that would have to be adjusted, given that people are now living longer. A lot of thinking would have to happen in terms of stuff like that. I don't know the details. I haven't given it the thought. It's still science fiction, basically. I mean, we're making progress. We'll live longer, but we're still nowhere near we'll live forever. Liam, is the West more fascist than capitalist at this point? It's certainly more, I don't like, let's not talk about fascism. It's more statist. The state has more power than the markets do. No question about that. Holden, give your top economic writers for blogs. Give your top economic writers for blogs and articles. By the way, I signed up for your New Capitalism course as well. Excellent. Let me know what you think of it. I hope you enjoy it. I mean, Scott Lincecum is excellent on policy issues. John Cochrane is often excellent on deeper economic issues. John Tamny is often very good. There are a bunch of other, I'd say, there's some Austrian economists. Don Boudreau is often very, very good. He just had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, and he writes he's the best letters to the editor writer I know. And a bunch of Austrian economists who are very, very good. That's a few off the top of my mind. Clark, is being a nobody necessarily a bad thing? Is trying to become a somebody second-handed? Yes. I don't know what becoming a somebody is. Now, you want to become a successful author, that's great. And being famous is part of that. You want to become, but just to be somebody for the sake of being somebody is second-handed. You want to be productive. You want to achieve great things, and hopefully you'll be recognized for the achievement of great things. You want that. You want to be recognized for the achievement. But to be recognized for achievement for the sake of the recognition, no. The ultimate sake is the doing great things. Harper Campbell, will better conservatives like Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro eventually turn on Trump if he does something beyond the pale? Like what? Like betraying an ally? Like stabbing them in the back? Certainly, I don't see Ben Shapiro doing it. I haven't seen Ben Shapiro's take on what happened. And I don't know about Mark Levin. I mean, he's so mixed. He's been so mixed. He's been so pro-Trump in spite of all the warning signs. I don't think he can afford to do it. He will lose his audience. And he knows it. Lose his income, lose everything. James, after Netanyahu saw what happened to Zelensky at the press conference, is he concerned Trump and his unpredictable zombie base could turn on Israel on a dime? Yes, as is Taiwan, as is Japan, as is South Korea, as is every ally in the United States. Yes, yes, yes. And Netanyahu's already felt it because he was pressured to sign this deal, which he did not want to sign from all indications. Andrew, Rubio is being zombified. He says the first thing to ask to achieve peace is, what does Putin want? It's as if they learned nothing from Hitler. Yep. I mean, Rubio was better the further removed he is from Trump, the better he is. But the closer he's become to Trump, the more zombified he's become. James, any society enthusiastically supporting Trump can't last long. Yeah, luckily, I don't think Americans are enthusiastically supporting Trump. I don't think that's the case. Monsano, advice on getting over a dear one rejecting my apology and change after deeply wronging, hurting them. Hard not to remunerate and wish for another chance. Well, I mean, you just have to accept it. They don't want it. You have to accept their free will. You have to accept that they're an independent person with their own decisions, their own reasons, their own agency, and you have to move on. You just have to move on. Focus on positives. Focus on making yourself better. Focus on producing, and focus on the rest of your life. You cannot dwell on these kind of things. You tried. You apologized. You attempted to make amends. That's it. You did what you can do. Now move on. It's sad. Accept the sadness. Embrace the sadness. But you've got to just put your head down and focus on the future. And doing anything else is, in a sense, is rejecting their autonomy. They should apologize to you because you feel bad. Well, it doesn't work that way. They get to make a decision about whether to forgive you. Oh, sorry, they should forgive you because you feel bad. No, they should forgive you if they really find forgiveness, if they really think that's appropriate in their life. And you have to accept their judgment, their decision, and move on. Michael, Ronald Reagan was never a bully or a thug. What made the GOP go after being attracted to optimism to be affected by ugliness and hate? We've talked about this a lot. It's the betrayal of, ultimately the betrayal even of Ronald Reagan, of the goal of a free capitalist society, the betrayal of the two Bushes, and the frustration that in spite of Ronald Reagan, you still get deficits, you still get government involved in all kinds of things it shouldn't be, you still get government spending money like there's no tomorrow, still get high tax rates, you still get regulations and controls and limitations, and then so it's that, and of course nothing Reagan did and nothing the right did diffuse the fact that people embrace Christianity and they embrace everything about Christianity, and that causes conflict and frustration and guilt associated with their own lives, and they don't quite understand what went wrong. Why didn't it work? Why didn't Ronald Reagan save the country and it was all over? Why was America attacked on 9/11? Why could we not win that war? Why did we have a financial crisis? Why could we not fix that? Why did America not respond appropriately? All of that, and the uncertainty and the rage and the anger and the fear, because they don't understand the cause. They don't know why it's happening. They don't understand what America is really about, and what it's really about is being betrayed by Ronald Reagan and every other Republican president in the 20th century, really. And so without intellectual ammunition, they are left naked before the storm. And the response to that is fear. And Trump fed the fear and cultivated a message in response to the fear. Ian, have you heard the stranger in the room theory? Normally, VP wouldn't be at this meeting. That's true. It's possible he was there to make the last-minute objection and blow things up. I don't think it was planned. I really don't. I really do think Trump wanted a deal. Trump was holding back. Trump could have blown this up in minute 10, in minute 8, in minute 12. Zelensky gave him lots of opportunities to come back with something more biting. And no, I do think Vance wanted to blow it up, because I think Vance, again, is much more pro-Putin than Trump is and much more anti-deal than Trump is. Trump wanted a deal. Vance didn't. Vance blew it up. I don't know if he planned it. I don't think Trump was in on it. And that's not me being nice to Trump. As you know, I'm never nice to Trump. I have no interest in being nice to Trump. On an opportunistic note, Liam says, I think Trump being over the top ridiculous this term will turn the election off from MAGA forever. Maybe we'll see. The Doodle Bunny, is Alice Weidel the German Margaret Thatcher? No, No, she's a pro-Putin lapdog. God, Margaret Thatcher would not be pro-Putin. So no, she's really bad. And to me, a big litmus test is, are you pro-Putin, against Putin? It's a big litmus test. Doodle Bunny, hey, Yaron, how's your cornhole? Jesus. Do colonoscopy take a long time to recover? It takes about a day, partially because you're just wiped out from the drugs that they give you in order to knock you out. And your stomach is just not normal because of all the prep before the colonoscopy. The real horrible thing about colonoscopy is the prep before. I had a colonoscopy and endoscopy, so they went through both sides. And it took me about a day more than a day, primarily because of the drugs. I was very sluggish Friday morning. I still did a show yesterday, doing a show now, so it could have wiped me out completely. Michael, with all the deep hatred and resentment of the population, it's hard to believe rights-respecting governments will be around for much longer. Michael gravitates between super optimism and super pessimism. It's like, within the same show, he goes from one to the other. It's hard, and yet somehow, decent countries still manage to chug along and survive. Matt, Trump MAGA are the epitome of spineless. Say thank you, wear a suit. These people would have been loyalists and fought the revolution. Oh, there's no question about that. James, will you talk about the war in Rwanda and Congo next week? The story is starting to finally gain international news coverage. Maybe. I'll read up about it. I just don't find it that interesting. These are wars that are ongoing and have, as compared to Ukraine or Middle East, have very little civilizational impact. There are no good guys in the Congo, sadly. But I'll take a look. I.C. Saracen. Some argue the Palestinians missed the opportunity to accept a peace deal like the 1948 petition. Would Ukraine consider a similar plan before facing a situation like Palestine? No. Ukraine is not Palestine. The only reason a partition deal was offered was because the Arabs said they would not allow the Jews to live side by side with them. So they had to be separated. Palestine, there was never a Palestinian state. There was no such thing as a Palestinian state ever in all of history. Ukraine has been a legit state for a long time. So, no, there's no parallel between the willingness to partition Israel and a partition plan. Russia has a country. It's called Russia. The Palestinians, the parallels just are not there. There's no parallels. Russia invaded a sovereign state. There was no sovereign state in 1948. One was being created, and the question was it going to be one or was it going to be two? And the only reason it was two is because of the hostility of the Palestinians. Roland, thank you. I appreciate it. He says, go Ukraine. Raphael says, what's next for Ukraine? I don't know. It really, really depends on Europe. It's going to depend on what happens after London. It's going to depend on Europe, and it depends on how badly Trump wants this deal. I don't think Trump's happy about what happened. I think Trump would rather have a deal, but it makes him look weak, I think, and he knows it. So I don't think he's happy about it. So we'll see how it evolves in the next few days. I don't know. I don't know how to predict these things. Apollo Zeus, is the current Russian sympathizing party a result of the disuse of the terms first, second, and third world these days? Like Russia's on par with America, okay, Canada, etc. I rarely hear these terms now. No, I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it has everything to do with what I've said. Their love of authoritarianism, their love of thugs, their love of strength, their love of power. Look at how they treat Canada. Canada is a first world country, an ally, a positive country in the world in compared to Russia. They hate Canada. They love Russia. That cannot be explained by the terminology we use. Paul, what do you think of Rubio supporting Trump and his behavior? I think it's despicable. I think Rubio, I never liked Rubio. He never had much credibility, but now he has nothing. He is a puppet. He is a zombie. John, most U.S. founders were Christians. More Enlightenment thinkers were Christians. As usual, Ron makes stuff up. Kant was pro-U.S. independence. Yes, Kant was. Kant's politics have some positive things in them. That's not why we hate Kant. We hate Kant because of his ethics and epistemology. Most U.S. founders were deists. They were not Christians. They were deists. Most Enlightenment thinkers, particularly the ones from France, who had a huge impact. You remember that both Jefferson and Adams and a number of the other founders were very influenced by the French Enlightenment. They spent time in France. Montesquieu is the thinker most quoted in the Federalist Papers. The French were basically deists. Some of them were atheists. The Christianity had almost no impact on the founding. The concept of individual rights is not a Christian concept, and it's true. The British and Scottish Enlightenment thinkers were Christian, and they held Enlightenment ideas in spite of their Christianity. It's like saying Newton was a Christian, which he was, and therefore his physics are a product of Christianity. No, his physics are a product of reason. The Enlightenment's political philosophy is a product of reason. It's a rejection of faith and a rejection of the political ideas in Christianity. Political ideas of Christianity have nothing to do with individual rights. They have nothing to do with liberty and freedom. John Locke is another example. Yes, he was Christian, but in his political theory, he stepped outside of Christianity and embraces reason. Now, I know you guys, I know if somebody's a Christian, then everything is determined by Christianity, but people can hold two ideas at once, and you can split Western civilization and say Christianity is what held them back, prevented them, for example, from coming up with a new radical morality that would have really made the Enlightenment revolutionary. And it's reason that enabled them to achieve what they achieved. Christianity is what hampered them. Reason is what gave them wings. I know it's hard, John. I know. Bear with me. Chris, I was surprised that Trump appeared okay with Vance's interjecting and changing the tone of a meeting when Trump seemed ready to make a deal. Wouldn't it be his MO to feel undermined by Vance and to reprimand him? I mean, maybe behind the scenes he's reprimanded Vance, but I think Trump was by this point pretty pissed at Zelensky already, and Vance kind of just let him loose. And Trump is an emotionalist, so. Upon consideration, he might be pissed at Vance, but at the moment, he just rode the tide. Enric, MAGA sees Trump providing them respect and loyalty. Trump and his adherents mutually reinforcing solves their sense of being insulted and disrespected, the inferiority complex. Yes, I think the group, the gang, the tribe is a defense against the inferiority complex that the members feel. Neo, is the West taking advantage of the minerals in Congo? Why is the West blamed over there for all the slave labor that's used to dig up the minerals? Because the West uses the end product. So all these minerals are being mined and shipped to the West, to China really, but for consumer products in the West, and therefore they're blamed. And they're also blamed, of course, for colonialism as the setup for what's happening there. And the reality is, I don't know enough about the history of the Congo to have an opinion about that. Clearly, Belgium colonialism in Central Africa was truly horrific, and they should apologize. Yaron, would you talk about the good news like a science and tech? On Monday, I don't have time today. There's a lot of good news going on. More mRNA treatments for cancer. The challenge, of course, is going to be, will RFK cancel them because it's vaccines, mRNA, evil vaccines. Matt, protesters are disputing Vance's family trip, disrupting Vance's family trip to Vermont. He preaches for years about an inefficient government and needs a vacation 1 month in. Andrew, the yelps about World War III is motivation by fear implied in every principle of freedom and justice should be sold out to get peace, and nothing is worth fighting for. But then what is the peace worth? Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of people telling me they wouldn't fight for Alaska if the Russians invaded Alaska. I mean, we're losing any semblance of self-respect, self-esteem, self-worth, any idea of a fight. A fight. This is the lack of masculinity. Here's where I think there is something about masculinity. A real man fights for his values. Fights, willing to use physical force for his values when they're attacked by physical force. And that is a masculine trait. And we're in a feminine society, and in that sense, Trump is helping feminize it. Fear should dominate. Deals are everything. Fighting for your values, fighting for your freedom, fighting for your country, if it represents freedom, that's out. So, ironically, MAGA is a feminizing influence on our culture. Feminizing, feminizing is the wrong term. Anti-masculine, anti-values, anti-fighting for your values, anti-masculine. I don't think that's feminized, because it doesn't mean that femininity doesn't fight for its values. Anti-masculine. Holden. Charlie Cook believes trade is zero-sum now. Yeah, Charlie Cook is the epitome of Trump zombie syndrome. He is a zombie, because I know what he was. And God, has he come a long way to zombiedom. It's unbelievable, 8-year path that he has taken to be a full-on zombie. All right, guys. Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for the support. And thank you, Troy. Troy was amazing. Thank you for the $500 Australian. Thank you for all the stickers. I know I didn't thank you one by one, as I usually do. I'm just in a bit of a rush. Got dinner plans in 10 minutes and then a concert. We're going to see Schumann's Piano Concerto, one of the best, most romantic piano concertos ever, and Sibelius' First Symphony, which should be great. Daniel Duffy, any investment advice for, oh God, what happened? The question disappeared on me. Okay, any investment advice for the Trump years? Should I sell my biotech stock and write it out and let RFK ruin my blood pressure? Hard to tell. My advice holds. Diversify, and diversify globally, and buy cheaper stocks. Tech stocks are very expensive. Buy value stocks. I, for one, would not hold biotech right now, not because I'm negative about the future of biotech, quite the opposite. I'm hugely positive about the future of biotech. I just don't trust RFK. He scares the bejesus out of me. So, and I would worry if I was a biotech executive right now. Thank you, guys. I will see you all Monday. Have a great rest of your weekend. I'm taking tomorrow off. Get Trump out of my system for a day. Monday, we'll have a show on the news in the afternoon and an interview in the evening. And the interview will be positive, about the founding of America, the ideas behind the founding of America. We'll take up John's question about how Christian were the founders with Muhammad Ali, of all people. That'll be fun. He's a young objectivist PhD student. So see you all soon. Have a great weekend. Bye.